you? Magnesium and calcium.
Oh no, my queen.
If the king doesn't lead, how can he expect his subordinates to follow?
Wow. Top 2 ranked chess players in the world, Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura.
Chess speaks for itself.
Welcome back.
Welcome back
everyone.
to the educational speedrun.
Slow Run.
Ultimate Chess SLOWRUN.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ultimate Chess SlowRun. You may have seen Hikaru's SlowRun, Gothamchess SlowRun, or just every other chess creator SlowRun, but I am confident I can provide the ultimate SlowRun. You may ask, what makes this the ultimate SlowRun? Well, let's take a look at the core of a SlowRun, the word slow. Almost all other big chess content creators are grandmasters, international masters, or comfortably over 2000 rated, and is a lot better at chess than I am. Therefore, steadily climbing and getting to the desired rating will take a lot longer for me, making it even slower, aka the ultimate slow run. However, that is not to say I am absolute trash. I have a peak rating around 1100 to 1200 on chess.com, which means I'm almost average. Still, when rage playing on my phone on the toilet, I can still manage to get whooped by some 800s on Blitz. Meaning there is room. We're talking rich billionaire mansion house, big white empty room for improvement. Therefore, if I want to achieve my goal in my desired time frame set for 1 year, I will buy one of my currently non-existing subscribers an incredibly nice, expensive chessboard to have at home. Subscribe. Now, what is my goal then? Well, it is a much nobler cause than your average slow run. My big enemies, being my older brother and former co-worker Bengt, has absolutely trashed me in chess for the last 1.5 years. But no more. My brother, my other enemy, sits around 1200 to 1500 rating and Bengt has similar skill. Meaning that my first goal is to get around 1400 and then eventually 1500 and then eventually beat the both of them. And if you're afraid that you won't learn anything from this slow run, I will say that I have 1 year studied as a high school teacher, so my teaching ability should be just a bit better than the others. Jokes aside, I have learned everything I have learned from various chess content creators, so I play pretty principled chess. And for you, it might actually be instructive of how a 1200 wins games by following principles rather than how a grandmaster might immediately find the best move. With that said, this is my new chess profile named Magnesium Calcium, whose name hails because of 3 reasons. 1. He is my distant cousin and share the same genetics. After all, we're both Scandinavian, so if you go back like 1500 years, we're probably related. Number 2, we both love to play the Catalan opening. And number 3, I'm mentally a teenager and find the name funny. And with that said, just a quick note before we start the first game. As I said, I will do my very best to play principled chess so that you can learn from it and easily climb. But at the same time, you will need to know the very basics, like how the pieces move. So if you don't, I recommend this video. Now with that said, let's get on with this legendary slow run. So, welcome to our first match. Unfortunately, the audio broke, so we're recording this commentary after the fact. I also want to point out that we're playing the normal rapid 10-minute timers, but it doesn't show. Well, it wouldn't be a first video without some small imperfections. So for this match, we're up against Fred from America. So now we are in the so-called opening stages of the game. And of course my man Fred plays the most common move, d4. And in response to d4, we are going to play the simple, the beautiful and the rock solid Caro-Kann, which is of course the favorite opening of famous YouTuber Gothamchess. And as most normal openings, the first few moves are very often pawn moves that either control or attack the very center of the board. And the first move, which also aims to control the center in the Caro-Kann, is by playing the move c6. Now the reason we play this move c6 is of course to build an attack on the d5 square, and therefore taking space and controlling the center, as they say. Control the center, yada yada. A lot of chess content creators will tell you this, but we will actually get into why later in this video. Because everyone works different, but at least for me chess gets a lot easier when you get the idea behind some of the principle. Now he developed his knight, which also does target the d5 square. But the easy thing with the Caro-Kann is you just play d5 anyway, as you are protected by both the pawn and the queen. And we get a trade which we will take back to not make sure we give up material for free, because we are protected by the queen, so nothing to be afraid about. And when we take back, we will also have somewhat fulfilled the first step in the opening by controlling the center, which means ding ding ding, it's time for step 2 and develop our minor pieces. The minor pieces being all the pieces worth 3 points of material, so knights and bishops. Now, as he can't take back since my pawn is protected, he himself start development by opening up a diagonal for his dark sword bishop. And you know, this is the second reason you want to push your pawns early in the opening. It's so that you create space for your bishops later. So he moved his pawn, but with no real threats, we can just easily start out by developing your knight. Nothing fancy. Now let's see here. Now Mr. Fred develops his other knight. But do you see what I see? As we earlier pushed the pawn, we now have open space for a bishop, which of course we will make use of. Now I will make use of a concept that crushes people in low elo. Let's play the special move, the pin.
The pin. A pin is a chess tactic where an attacking piece bishop, rook, or queen restricts an opponent's piece from moving, because doing so would expose a more valuable piece, usually the king or queen directly behind it. Pinned pieces become immobile targets, often leading to material loss or severe positional restrictions. In other words, for the few moves the pinned player need to spend to unpin themselves, the pinned piece undoubtedly becomes completely sealed to the chessboard square.
And after that very intense anime explanations, he has moved his bishop to block the pin, so that if he moves his knight, we just trade bishops instead. Which isn't a great move from me, as it was really the only square the bishop could go to. You could even say I helped him develop the bishop, which is quite funny. Well, let's not dwell on the past. For our next move, we want to keep on developing. But as you can see, my bishop is stuck under the pawn. So let's first move the pawn, simultaneously protecting our pawn in the center. Now, my overarching plan here in this slow run is to win every single game until 800. But this guy is playing pretty good so far, so we'll see actually. Okay, let's see. So he plays bishop g5, attacking my queen, which means it's a free bishop. Or is it? Of course, his bishop is defended by the knight, and the knight is no longer pinned to anything right now. No queen, no king behind it, just a bishop defended by the queen. Now the options here rather becomes to block or move the queen. But as we are behind in development and still want to develop our minor pieces, let's develop the knight and protect the queen from this attack. Now notice that I'm also drawing lines to the b2 square. Now that the bishop has moved, he has created a weakness we might be able to target in the future. But let's not forget to first develop and get castle and make our king safe before we start the attack. And now my guy Fred, instead of castling, just immediately attacks my bishop. And now, as I mentioned before, he has unpinned his horse, so I see no reason taking. After all, to take is a mistake. Unless you get a benefit from it. So let's just move our bishop back. The question is, which square? I kinda just wanna keep the pressure on this diagonal, so I think I'm just gonna move it to h5, keeping the pressure on the horse. Sorry, I mean knight. In Sweden we just call the knight häst, which means horse, so I'm keeping the words a bit mixed here. But hey, in defense to my fellow Swedes though, it does look more than a horse than a knight though. Whoa! With no rhyme or rhythm, he just randomly fires away at my knight. So let's just take back, since unless I miss some kind of tactic, he has just helped me develop my queen to get to a more active square, and it really helps us really. Here we see the problem with attacking before you have finished developing, or before thinking really, as some trades just help you develop, and it seems like he still doesn't want to castle here. I think there might be some tactics, but as we're just playing simple chess, let's just develop our bishop instead. It can't be bad at the very least. In retrospect, there might be more active squares we could have developed to, but when you are learning the Caro-Kann, normally you want the bishop to go to d6 or e7 depending on the situation. At least that is what Mr. Gothamchess has told me. Oh, I did not see that coming. That was a nice move from Mr. Fred here, attacking my queen and my bishop at the same time, defended by the unpinned knight. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call a fork from my opponent. Now the important thing here is not to panic. For example, blindly taking back just makes his knight more active and forces a bunch of trades. At the same time, we do not want to give up our bishop or our queen. So let's see. Fortunately for us, we have this nice move with both pieces protecting each other, queen to g6. With this counter move, we don't have to take back with a pawn, which in most cases you wanna avoid. Okay, so he keeps aggressing taking back immediately, but we happily take with our bishop, as we only really move the bishop to a more active square. Alright, so he castled, and as we have completed all development for our minor pieces, we do the same. Now keep in mind the mental checklist here. King is safe or castled, we somewhat control the center, rooks are connected, and our minor pieces are developed. This now means we are officially in the middle game. Now being in the middle games means our priorities change. Our king is safe, we built a small wall of peasants, and it's time for the rest of our pieces to do the job they're paid to do. So he moves his pawn forward, not really sure what that purpose is, but I'm just going to follow my middle game principles and develop my major piece, aka the rook. Okay, so Fred moves his bishop looking for a trade, which also protect that pawn back there, but in preparation, if we trade bishops, I'm going to put my knight here, looking at this pawn on c2. Now the second priority you have in the middle game, when you have developed your major pieces, that being the queen and rook, is that you are looking to either strike in the center and create space, or target the opponent's weaknesses, which in this case we are doing, because if you look closely, the only thing guarding this bishop is a pawn. And we have two pieces targeting the bishop. And it seems rather than trading bishops, he moves his knight, which is already a mistake. Since even if he attacks my bishop with two different pieces, it's defended 2 times by my pawns. Which means in case of a trade, I'm just up in material. And on my end, both my bishop and knight are targeting his bishop, and the poor guy only has one defender. Which means that, bam, we take the bishop, and in the case he takes back, we get our first free pawn. Hashtag no taxes. So let's see what he does. And he takes back with his pawn, so we'll just go ahead with our plan and take with our bishop, which means we're officially up our first point of material. We now have the initiative. Okay, so he threatens the bishop. Which, is it really a threat since I can just move my bishop? Of course we still have to move the bishop. The question is, where to move it. Here I could try to hold on to it for as long as possible, as usually bishops are better than knights. But seeing as we're up in material, I actually don't mind trading. So let's look for a trade that helps us in some way. I'm actually thinking of going back to g6, since if he takes my bishop with his knight, we will now have our second rook on an open file, meaning we have 2 active rooks, while his rook is just staring at his own pawn on d4, which is not threatened by anything at the moment. There are other options, but let's not complicate the position, let's just drop our bishop back and try to simplify the game. So let's just see if he takes the bait. If he doesn't, we just have a super strong bishop. And boom, there's one less knight to worry about. Meanwhile, we have these 2 dominating rooks on open files. Alright, so Fred goes on the offensive with his knight threatening my bishop. Now here, speaking from experience, whenever they jump the knight aggressively or unexpectedly, you don't want to rush to any decision. Especially when you're new to chess, as knights are very hard to predict and account for. Like in this case, the knight is actually doing a fork, targeting my pawn. So let's defend the pawn with our bishop and also keep the diagonal protected from the knight at the same time. Note that we could only really play this move as we move the bishop. Otherwise the fork would actually win some material, and this type of defensive option don't always exist. Knights are just really scary if you get them to active squares. And here I really don't remember what I'm doing. I'm just drawing lines pretending to be a mastermind, like Hikaru or L from Death Note. So let's see what he plays. Okay, a4 protecting the knight. What my plan here should be is just to follow principles and either kick the knight away or get my rook or bishop to an even more active square. But it seems what I'm doing is going back in time, showing earlier moves. Which is not a habit I recommend, as it doesn't really work on a real chessboard. I mean, unless you're like the main character from Queen's Gambit who can see the chessboard on the roof and stuff. Unfortunately, I don't remember what I was talking about at this moment. But as I said, our plan here should be to keep following principles and either move the rook or kick the knight. But as I see that he can just move his knight back to c3 blocking our rook, our choices become easy. So let's first play the move c2, putting the rook on the second rank on your opponent's half, which in contrast is definitely a habit that you want to have. Now we have both our rooks targeting the pawn close to the king, but also since he has just barely moved any pawns, we also fork the other pawn on b2. So now, no matter what he plays, we will be getting material. And this is what I think is a common misconception in chess, that you either choose to play in a more tactical way or in a more principled way. It's when you follow principles and have good habit that the different ideas of tactics and strategies come more naturally to you. Anywho's, now that he protected himself, let's grab the pawn on b2. So now we are up 2 points in material and the pawns are still completely tax free. My plan is now to get rid of the knight and convert this to an endgame. And he moves his rook looking for a trade, and even though we are up in material, we still want to trade on our terms. Remember, to take is a mistake, since trading here would just put this rook on d1 to a more active square, and then if he ever moves his knight or pawn on b7 will become a weakness. We still have some time on our hand, so let's not rush to a decision. We still have to deal with his knight. So here I'm considering going to a2, targeting the pawn on a4, and in the case he still wants to trade rooks here, it would be more beneficial, as his rook would be on a less active square, so let's just play the goddamn move. Now the ball is in his court. Does he want to trade? Does he want to try to complicate things? I am threatening another pawn, so he has to be careful. Because me grabbing another pawn means that my pawns on the right side of the board becomes very easy to push. And he isn't careful at all, because I can go to a3 and hit him with a4. Now, even though he was attacking me, since he moved his knight, I could now threaten both his horse and pawn. The only viable option for him here is really to move the knight again, but then we will just be taking this juicy pawn. You could say he's in a pretty forked up situation. And now that he moves his knight, let's just go ahead with our plan and take our third free pawn. And he must be getting frustrated because he goes a1 immediately. We're up 3 pawns, let's just trade, but let's not blunder anything. For example, in this case, both his horse and rook is attacking my pawn on a7. So let's hit him with this multi-purpose move a6, attacking his knight and protecting the pawn at the same time. Now we are beginning to get low on time, so let's not play too slow. Now he moves his knight, so here I want to try to move my rook to an even more active square. I'm considering either f4, attacking the pawn, or just attacking his knight again, but with my rook on c8, which is what I eventually play, since now he has to move his knight again. Or he can protect it with his rook, which means that if you spotted it like me, he now has a pin piece. And now that his knight can barely move, let's attack it with even more pieces. Let's just push the pawns. And this is a habit that you wanna keep in mind. Put pressure on the pinned pawn. And just like that, he is forced to move. Remember, we're up in material. We just trade. And now that he is forced to take back, we just target another pawn with bishop a7. And okay, he found this nice move protecting his pawn and actually stopping our flank pawn on a6 from marching forward. So let's just maybe centralize the bishop even more with b6, making our eventual pawn push unstoppable. As we are in the endgame, he is trying to activate the king by pushing a pawn. So let's just activate our king first to not get into any trouble later. So as we can see, he moved his king, so let's just continue with the simple plan of pushing the pawns. How is he going to stop it? After all, if he moves his knight, that means we can target the b4 pawn with our bishop. And this is exactly why you want to trade when you're up in material. The plan just becomes so simple and easy. So he now moves his knight, but we will just continue marching with our pawns as it is protected. This is war, Fred, not a playground for your horse. And situations like this are just great for me, as usually when I'm losing games versus Bank the Berserker, it's these type of slow burn games that eventually leads to one's demise. But this time it's our turn to burn the battlefield, as Fred ignores my pawn and goes pawn f4. We know what to do, keep on marching. I bet Fred is really beginning to feel the pressure, and that is why he just moved his king. Now I can push my pawn again, only 1 square from promoting. So he found this nice move, knight to b3, protecting the promotion square. But now his knight is beginning to be overloaded, and that is why we hit him with the special removing the defender tactic.
Removing the defender tactic is a chess tactic exploiting a defensively overloaded chess piece, where a piece protecting an important target, a piece, square, or checkmate threat, is either captured, forced to move, exchange, or threatened. By eliminating this guardian, the attacker exploits the newly created weakness, often resulting in material gain or a forced checkmate.
And with that explanation out of the way, Since he can't do anything, he just straight up ignored my pawn promotion. But now we're able to push and then take his knight, which is what happens. And now we still have the second flank pawn walking up to become the new queen. But Fred in panic attacks me instead, but that is just a pawn trade, and remember, we are up in material. But with no way or time to protect the pawn from promoting, he pushes his own pawn instead. And for us, here it's just simple, just push. The queen is coming. He attacks my pawns again, but our pawn is so close to promote, we can just ignore and push. He now has no way to stop it. So he takes, which is a check, so we are going to take with our king. But now that he moves his pawn, my queen is inevitable. So now, with the queen on the board, we are going to look for checks or checkmates. So we start off with e4. Now, of course, he has to move the king. So we are first going to try and bring our bishop back and see if there is any check. So, okay, he moves the king, bring the bishop back. Still can't see any checkmate, but now we have our second plan of just promoting a second queen. So let's just push the pawn. And at this point, he barely has any moves left. So he moves the king back, but as my queen is covering the whole e-file, he has no way of stopping my second queen. My queen by itself is just building an invisible wall in front of the king. So now it doesn't matter what he does, he goes back one square, but that now means my second queen is on the board. And here I will say, Fred, well played, but I'm afraid you lost. Okay, so welcome to the analysis board where we will be going through the games after each episode. This time, since I did do a re-recording, I will not be super thorough, but there are a couple of things I want to explain. So the thing I want to start off explaining is controlling the center. Each and every YouTuber always says it. Control the center. But why do we want to control the center? I think I have a pretty good explanation for it. So it's actually easiest to begin explaining with looking at a piece like the knight. So let's take this knight for example. The knight jumps in an L shape, right? And now this knight has 2 squares to go. It's undeveloped and it's in the back rank of the chessboard. Now let's begin and look at his knight that I developed here. So let's say I move here first, just so we're gonna move. Now this knight has 1, 2, 3 different places the knight can go. And that is because it has jumped to this square, of course. But it's not in the center, it's on the edge of the board, so it only has 3 squares to go to. Now let's play a move. And a move like this, just so I can explain. Let's look at this knight. This knight right here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares to go to. When I put my knight in the center, and this is true for each and every piece, they control even more of the board. So the reason that you want to put your pawns in the center is from, let's say, negating or rejecting the other, like, stronger pieces to get to a more central positions. Now that I have my pawn here in the center, he can't go here, because even, let's say, in a scenario where he first would have a queen here and I would play something like this, he doesn't want to go here because obviously a pawn is worth less than a knight, or more than a knight, so he wouldn't want to make this trade. So by putting our pawns in the center, we reject the other pieces from getting to a more active square. And now the second thing I want to go through is the pin itself. So obviously in the episode I made a big deal about the pin. I had this like Jujutsu Kaisen anime explanation. Well, in normal cases when you play the Caro-Kann, the pin is good. Why? Because often your opponent wants to develop his bishop to a more active square, right? We talked about that. And you block with the knight, and the opponent plays something like knight f3 here. And now you want to counter pin and like have a pin yourself, because obviously the knight moves, you grab a bishop or the queen. And it makes it so that this square on e5 is unavailable, since normally you want to go here and put even more pressure on the pinned pawn, right? We also talked about that, putting pressure on the pinned pawn. But in the match that happened, he played this move, right? He played pawn to d3. And what this does is block in his own bishop. Obviously his dark square can now develop, but his light square only has one place to go, and that is on e2. So what I'm doing here, after I played my knight and he played his knight, when I play this pin, I'm just helping him put his bishop the only square it can go. So this wasn't really a strong move from me. So there are positions when it's better or worse to go for a pin. Now the third and final explanation is of the actual game and how I think at the very least that I won the game. It's when we both had castled and when the queens were traded really. So now we have no queens on the board and we have less attacking chances because of it. And now I'm just following principles as I always do. But he isn't following principles. His rooks are still on the same position they started off with. Yeah, of course he castled, but his other rook is still here. And instead of moving a pawn, because I haven't developed my major pieces, I put my rook here. And now obviously he goes for this trade, but now instead of like looking for a trade and just pushing my pawn, I am continuing developing. And I can't really, develop my rook anywhere here. So I keep my rook here and I'm looking to attack a weakness since I have developed all that I can develop, so to speak. My rook is on this file, also looking at this pawn in the future should there be a trade. He attacks again with this knight, which of course is a mistake. It's also a mistake. I'm not going to disregard that. But since we now trade and he attacks my bishop, we trade again. Now in this position, I have two active rooks. Meanwhile, his rooks are just looking at his pawn. So that gets me the initiative. I can just go with my rook here and I can threaten two pawns at the same time. He is not looking at what I am potentially attacking in the future, and he's not following principles, developing his own rook to open files. It would even be better for him to play, for example, his rook here and trade the rooks. So following principles got me an advantage in the middle game. This just shows you the strength of following principles. Well, that's it for this episode. So obviously this episode will be a bit different since normally I will try to do things on the fly. The whole point of this channel is that I can record videos more easily. On my main channel, Anti-Meta-Brain, I take great pride for every second being well edited, but the videos are scripted and take a lot of time. Speaking of time, I'll make sure that the next episode actually has the game clock. Now my friends, we still have a long way to go. We may have beaten a low elo opponent, but we are still far from the levels of demons like Bengt the Berserker or my brother Ludwig. So I hope that you enjoy this video and subscribe to follow my journey of completing the ultimate slow run.